You are listening to an American Free Press podcast.
Joining me on the line is Victor Thorn, the hard-hitting researcher, journalist, and author of over 50 books and chapbooks. Victor, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Dave. Thanks.
Victor, I saw an article you wrote on the American Free Press website, Template for Terror. Can America end up like South Africa? Is that stretching it a little too much?
I don't believe so at all. And I did an interview with James Kelso, who over the last month or so does a radio talk show, and he's interviewed over a dozen different people that live in South Africa. So most of them white, some of them black. So he's getting straight first-hand information from people that actually reside there. And if anybody goes to AmericanFreePress.net and reads this article, I guarantee it'll horrify you, because this is what happens when the whites of a country allow the blacks to take over. And the violence, the destruction, the nosedive of the economy, all of these things are a template for what could happen in this country if we keep going on the path we're on with Obama. And basically the way to look at it is, in human nature, everybody tries to see how far they can push things. So if you drive on a highway and the speed limit's 55 and you can get away with going 60, the next time you're going to try to go 65. And if you get away with that, you're going to try to go 70. Well, we can all trace this back, Dave, to right when Obama first came into office, and the Black Panthers down in Philadelphia were terrorizing white voters at a polling station. Well, they had already been convicted. All Eric Holder had to do was sentence them. And he let them go, and he said, basically, we're going to have two different tiers of justice now, one for whites and one for blacks. And when the blacks realized that, and then when we jump forward to Ferguson, what happened in Baltimore with the riots, and we see in the last month now that violence has spiked in cities all across America. Why? Because Obama and his cronies in the White House have basically said, we're not going to stop what's going on with black violence, black looting, rioting, and on and on and on. So they've pushed the envelope to such an extent that the blacks have finally said, nothing's even going to happen to us. So they keep escalating and ratcheting up everything, and that's a lot of what America's racial powder keg confronts, is this slippery slope that we're on with Obama. And I'd even go so far as to say that the problem isn't the blacks themselves. Of course, they're the crux of this situation, but the bigger problem is not only with Obama and Holder and people like him, but also white liberalism. We're not addressing solutions to this problem. And it'd be real easy for me to come on here and just bitch about everything that's wrong, but we have to start looking at solutions also. And here's a good example. It's always good to change perspective when examining a situation. So instead of looking at blacks, let's look at whites. Say there's a whole community of whites, and they live up in a mountain, okay? And the unemployment rate among them is 50 or 60%. They can't get jobs. So some social workers go up there, and they want to examine the situation and see why these people can't get jobs. And what they discover is that the people dress like it's the 1920s, and what they do is they pick their nose and pick their butts in public. Okay, so when they go to job interviews, they dress like the 1920s, and they act like this. So now, if this social worker came to me and said, hey, Victor, we have a problem here, and explains it, I'd say, well, why don't we go to these people and tell them, don't dress like it's the 1920s, and when you're out in public, don't pick your nose and don't pick your butts. Well, it's their culture, though. That's the culture that they're in. Well, do we want to change their culture, improve it, or do we want to keep them at a disadvantage? Obviously, we would tell these people not to do those types of behavior. So now let's take this to the black community, okay? And everybody says, oh, you can't tell them anything because that's their culture. Well, do we want them to speak Ebonics? Do we want them walking around with their pants hanging down on their butts? And all of these different things. Do we want them to be emulating gangbangers and pimps with their hose and rap stars and so forth? Well, President Obama, for the last 7 years, has had every opportunity to do the same thing I would have said to the white people in that community, is why doesn't he come out and say, look, you're at a severe disadvantage. You can't speak in Ebonics anymore. You have to speak proper English. You can't dress with clothes that look like gangbangers or convicts in prison, and on and on and on. So the biggest racist in this country isn't people like me and you, Dave, and everybody else that was in America's racial powder keg. We're the ones actually trying to help the black community by telling them you have to change your behavior, you have to change your culture. But it's the white liberals that say, oh, no, we can't change their culture. It's Barack Obama, who not only is stoking up the racial violence and the racial animosity, but refusing to tell the blacks that they have to improve themselves if they want to become assimilated members of society. And to me, it seems very simple. Get on your bully pulpit for Obama and deliver the speech the same way I would tell white people. You can't dress like it's the 1920s and pick your nose and butts out in public. So it's, to me, very, very clear.
I guess the question is, why won't he just take this simple step?
Well, I know the answer to that is it all goes back to power, okay? Barack Obama is a millionaire. Al Sharpton is a millionaire. Eric Holder's a millionaire. Jesse Jackson's a millionaire. Many of these people in the NAACP and the Black Congressional Congress are all very wealthy. What they do is they run a slavery system. They're the slave owners. The blacks in these ghettos are the slaves, and the plantation is the government system and the liberal dependency system that they've constructed and they refuse to change from. So the answer is that they're exploiting their slaves. The black slaves and the slave owner, the one who's the real cracker, is people like Jesse Jackson and Obama and Holder and Reverend Al. They're slave owners, and they derive huge amounts of fame, power, and money from perpetuating this system. So here's another example of, I think about this stuff, and I don't want to simply just point a finger. I'm also looking for solutions. Pretend that I have a daughter, okay, and she's in 10th grade or so, and I don't have a daughter in 10th grade. And she says to me, Dad, I want to drop out of school. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't give a damn. And she said, well, I don't have any skills. I don't have any talents or anything. What am I going to do? I'm like, well, we're going to build a little shack for you out in the backyard, okay? And you can live there. She says, oh, that's cool. Okay, what am I going to do for food, though? I'm like, well, I'll give you your food. She says, what about money? I don't have any money. I'll give you your money also. Well, how do I pay for rent? Nah, there is no rent. You can live for free. And the daughter says, why? All right, I'll take it. Now, the big question is, am I doing my daughter a favor by making her utterly and completely 100% dependent on me? Well, the answer is no. I'm putting her at a huge disadvantage by doing that. Well, anyway, there's a couple other people in the neighborhood, and they tell their sons and daughters, yeah, we're going to build you a shack and make you completely dependent. Well, some years down the line, one of these boys comes over, impregnates my daughter, and they have a baby. Okay, this kid grows up, and it's in the 10th grade and says, yeah, I want to drop out of school. And my daughter says, yeah, go ahead. And the kid says, well, what am I going to do for food and money? Oh, don't worry, Grandpa's going to take care of it. He gives us food, he gives us money. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to build another shack beside ours, and you can live in that shack. Well, if we do this for a couple of generations, Dave, guess what we have? The projects.
Right.
We have the ghettos. This is what white liberalism has done over the last 50 years. This is what Barack Obama and Holder and all the rest of them, they say we want slaves in total 100% dependency on us so that we can get money from taxpayers, so we can become fabulously wealthy, and we can have our slaves on the plantation. We have modern-day slavery in the ghettos in America, and it's blacks and white liberals that are the slave owners. It's not us, Dave. We're the ones that are trying to help them. We're trying to give solutions. America's racial powder keg not only points out the problems, but gives and offers ways that we can get out of this. Think of the literally trillions of dollars that have been squandered over the last 50 or 60 years on welfare and food stamps to the ghettos. What if we would have set up free enterprise systems where businessmen were encouraged to go in there and set up businesses where the blacks could actually get jobs and work and not be utterly dependent on the government? Well, what would happen? We wouldn't have a black president like Barack Obama. We wouldn't have Eric Holder. We wouldn't have Reverend Al and Jesse Jackson. They'd be out of the picture. What we would have is businessmen that are hiring blacks that can be productive members of society, that aren't speaking Ebonics, that are dressing properly. They're not dealing drugs and pimping hoes. This is so simple to do, and yet, because of everything I've explained, these people won't take those necessary steps. And what we're doing is seeing further and further separations of society. We have people that are productive and are able to function in society versus those that have literally no skills whatsoever and become totally dependent slaves who turn then to violence, stealing, pimping, and drug dealing. So that's our situation.
Unfortunately, I think you're right, but how are we going to get out of it?
How we get out of it is that Barack Obama needs to be exposed beyond simply venues like American Free Press, Dave Gahary, Victor Thorn, America's Racial Powder Keg. And the reason this isn't being exposed more is due to political correctness. Again, you can't say blacks have to move beyond speaking any Ebonics. White liberals say, oh my God, that's racist. You can't criticize their culture. That's the culture they come from. Well, just like the culture of the people that pick their noses and butts. Cultures can improve, can't they? Are we so handcuffed that a culture can't improve? Well, of course not. It can improve. But if we have people like everyone I just mentioned that keeps promoting political correctness, and we have this big taboo that you're not allowed to speak of these things, then it won't change, Dave. So that's why America's Racial Powder Keg is so vital. And all of the articles that American Free Press has been running for the last 3 or 4 years, that we're not afraid of political correctness. We're going to speak the truth. We're going to call a spade a spade. And as I said, we're the ones that are doing them a favor, or at least trying to do them a favor. I mean, when I was watching the Baltimore riots, oftentimes when they were interviewing the blacks, they really needed to run subtitles at the bottom of the screen because I couldn't understand them.
Yeah, I know.
And Dave, this is a crime. This is a crime that we have human beings in this country that are speaking the English language that can't be understood.
Yeah, it is pretty bad. I mean, not pretty bad, it's bad.
Why doesn't Barack Obama have a press conference today and say to the black community, the word is truth, not truth. The word is youth, not youth. The word is ask, A-S-K, not axe. I want to ask you a question. One of these blacks was asked, doesn't all this destruction here in Baltimore, doesn't it break your heart? And a black person said, it do. No, it does. Not it do. It do. So these kids are going to school, they're 9th, 10th, 11th grade. They cannot speak the English language. And if they try to, if there's a black kid in Baltimore that says, I want to ask you a question and I want to know the truth, they'll be like, what the hell are you talking like a honky for, man, you Uncle Tom? So these kids are beaten up and criticized if they try to improve themselves. Obama doesn't step in and try to say, look, maybe you should say ask instead of axe. Do you know how stupid you sound when you talk like that?
No, you're right. I mean, he has, like you said, the bully pulpit. All he has to do is just really say it once, and it would improve the situation dramatically. But like you said, he has a vested interest in making sure that he doesn't do that, along with the rest of these so-called leaders in the black African-American, whatever you want to call it, community. And the book, America's Racial Powder Keg, goes into great detail about all of this stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's race pimping. And on the cover of it, you see all of these race peddlers right there in full glory. And there's not that much difference if you really strip back the veneer between Barack Obama and this Malik Shabazz, the head or former head of the Black Panther Party. They both have the same sentiments in mind. They just do it from different angles, so it's a good cop, bad cop. But what it boils down to is that they hate the white community. I'm going to give you one last example, Dave, of something that was told to me recently. I know a woman that has a daughter that for the summer got a job at a department store, okay? She was there for a couple weeks, and she's a cashier. Well, this black lady comes up with a whole cart full of dresses, $1,000 worth of dresses. And this girl is beeping them through the register, and the black lady says, excuse me, do you think you could hurry up a little bit? Now, this girl had only been on there for a couple of weeks. She's doing the best she can. She says, ma'am, I'm trying the best I can. But if you want it to go slower, there's a rack right here where you can take off the hangers of the dresses so I don't have to, and that'll speed the whole process up. Well, here's what the black lady said to her. She says, oh, no. That's not going to happen today. Our people have been slaves to yours for too long, and during this transaction today, you're going to be my slave. Everybody in line behind this woman gasped. I mean, noticeably gasped. And this girl said that one little kid said, Mommy, did you hear what that lady just said to her? I can at least give her credit because she was telling the truth. This is the way they genuinely feel. And if there's white liberals out there that are like, oh, we just have peace and love and all that, they don't like us. They don't like us. They have these deep resentments in them. And until we grow up and realize it and accept it, we're not going to do anything to change the problem. And Obama and the Black Panthers and Reverend L, they feed off of this hatred. It's their energy. It's their fuel that keeps them going. It's a bleak situation, and when you look at the crime stats in this country and how they've escalated since Baltimore, everybody listening to this show should start standing up and saying, we got a real problem here, and we can't gloss over it anymore with this political correctness, white liberalism crap.
You're 100% right. And of course, it's not all blacks, as we know. I mean, that's certainly not the case. I know plenty of black Americans who are more white than a lot of whites. So I think it's a matter of intelligence and class. I think that these blacks, the ones that are referred to as savages or animals, they just don't want to change. They want to fall for what you're talking about here, and they don't want to speak proper English. They want to speak whatever their version of the language is, Ebonic or whatever it might be. And they want to hate us, and it's not just them, of course. It's other people, other races who are getting into the mix, and we could talk about that another time. But you have to look at this thing from a different angle. We have to all get on the same page. We have to tackle the enemy together. Isn't that right?
Exactly, and I was down in D.C. over the weekend at the American Free Press open house, and Willis Carto said, we need to get 1 million copies of America's Racial Powder Keg out to the country. He says that will change the situation. And he's exactly right, because, even so-called conservative stations like Fox News, they still tap dance around us. They walk on eggshells and walk on tippy toes. So this is a no-holds-barred look at race. It's a short book. Someone could read it in one day if they so chose to. And we can't keep our heads buried in the sand anymore. Dave, I also want to say rest in peace to Michael Collins Piper, longtime writer for American Free Press. Good friend of mine. I published the Michael Collins Piper Reader a few years ago, and last weekend he died. So just rest in peace to him, and all our best wishes to all those around him.
Yeah, absolutely. It was sad. And sadly, he passed away on the same day that the open house was taking place. Victor Thorn, hard-hitting researcher, journalist, author of over 50 books. The latest book, America's Racial Powder Keg, How a Violent Dependency State Has Been Created Within the Black Community. Pick that up and get educated, and let's get our country back. Victor, thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, Dave, and for having the courage to address issues like this. We need more radio talk show hosts like this that do that and aren't afraid to step over the line and put political correctness in a rearview mirror, because the longer we're enslaved by PC mentality, the longer it's going to be until we correct these problems.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.